Hi everybody. So in this video, we're going to talk about revenue again, but we're actually going to explore that concept I mentioned at the end of the last video. And the nice thing is if you've noticed from this page, there's not a lot of notes actually to take with this one. So the first thing we're going to do is start with a supply and demand graph. We're just going to say you've got a quantity and a price. And we know you've got a demand curve and a supply curve, right? And we're leaving ourselves some space over here. Now, in this market, for whatever this product is, there's a quantity for the market and a price for this market. And we remember that with markets, especially with markets we're talking about now, that there are many buyers and many sellers, right? So it's all of the sellers and buyers. And now what we haven't talked about so far is one buyer or one seller and looked at their particular situation. Actually, we kind of looked at one buyer. We talked about consumption in unit 2, but we haven't talked about like one company yet. So we're going to redraw a picture right next to it for one company. Now this is the quantity that this company makes. This is the quantity in the market, and that's the quantity for the firm. Now, normally we'll just say Q, but notice that I'm putting these here because I'm trying to distinguish these two in your mind. Still the same prices, and we've got a firm. Now, one thing to observe about markets is that for them, right, these types of markets we're looking at, for them, all the buyers and sellers, their combined work here is what sets the price. But if you were a firm in this market and you said, hey, my grebes are awesome. They're fantastic. I love my grebes, and you'll love them too. Well, everybody's going to look at you and go, your grebes are identical to everybody else's. That's another assumption. Identical products, right? And so there's really no need for you to say my grebes are better because nobody's going to believe you. It's irrational for you to say that, and you have no ability to affect the market price. You're but one little tiny fish in the giant ocean of buyers and sellers. And so you're too small to affect that price. So if you walked out and you said, my grebes are better, they would go, nah, no, they're not. They're identical to everybody else's. And so the price that the market sets is the price that you have to take. So we call you a price taker. You just have to take whatever the market price is. And well, what's the market price? It's whatever that value is. So this is the price. And we would say that if you sold 1 unit, well, you would get that amount of price. Now remember, we talked about total revenue and we talked about marginal revenue. And marginal revenue is the additional revenue that you generate from selling 1 more unit. Well, we observed in the last lecture that MR is the same as price because every time you sell one, it's the same additional revenue. So no matter how many units you sell, they're all priced at the same price. They have to be. Because if you tried to sell a higher price, nobody would buy from you. If you sold a lower price, you're just foregoing money. So all of your prices are the same. And your marginal revenue is the same. And if we connect all these dots, we say that that's the price. But we also say it's the marginal revenue. It's also the demand for this firm's products. It's the demand for this firm's products. So you notice that it's perfectly elastic. And that's because if this firm were to raise its price, it would lose all of its customers, right? It's perfectly elastic. It's infinitely responsive to changes in price. So that elasticity concept we talked about in the last one applies here in the last unit. This is the demand, again, just for this firm's products, right? The demand curve in the market is downward sloping. But for this firm, it's a straight line, goes straight across. And the fourth thing that this is average revenue. And so it spells out a nice phrase, Mr. Darp. Now, there are many ways to remember this, right? But Jacob Clifford, the great AC/DC economics guy, he has a way of teaching this to students. And he makes a really funny sounding voice for his character, Mr. Darp. Now, I'm going to try to explain Mr. Darp to you. And this is how I learned Mr. Darp. Using Mr. Clifford's explanation. And basically, he would say that Mr. Darp is kind of strange, and he's got a weird voice, and he goes, every time that people say, who are you? And he goes, I'm Mr. Darp, and he points to his face. Right? So anytime you see Mr. Darp, he points at his face just like that. It's a strange habit. But Mr. Darp. And if you do this enough times, do it with me. Like make a weird voice and weird face, right? Nobody's going to see. Take your pointer finger and go, Mr. Darp. Just like that. Well, this is Mr. Darp. And so Mr. Darp is this nice horizontal line. So anytime you get a question that says, what's the price? Well, it's the same as marginal revenue. It's the same as the demand curve for the firm's products. It's the same as the average revenue as well. So sometimes students are like, what's the AR? That's the average revenue of that quantity of units, which for this firm would be the same as the marginal revenue, the demand, and the price. All right, so that's what we got to know from this particular lecture. Hopefully it helped you. See you next time.